Hi Nathan, cheers for coming to this little meeting with me. I'm James, the technical coach, so I'll be talking to you loads of technical ability questions. So
Mhm.
diving in straight away, how many times do you train with your technical coach?
So it'll be normally on a Monday, on a Wednesday, sorry, not a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a Thursday, and then also on a Sunday. Um, the Wednesday will be if we don't end up having any matches, then we'll train instead of the matches. And on a Sunday, if we've not had a tournament that has run over Saturday and Sunday, so if we're still quite fresh, then we'll train on the Sunday evening.
Perfect. How long are the training sessions?
So typically they'll be around 2 hours, but that is more based upon kind of being able to get the court hours. So over previous years when we've been able to access the courts a bit more, it's been a little more extended, closer to maybe 3 hours, so that we can do some technical stuff for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then get a chance to implement it into games.
Perfect. Is the training differ? As you say, you've got tournaments, and then you will train instead of tournaments. Like the pre-season training, the end of the season training. Is that completely different between mid-season?
Yeah, so if we're pre-season, then we'll spend quite a lot of time working on things that we're quite bad at. So an example for me would be I'm not brilliant at hitting slices overhead. So when you like come across the shuttle that way or that way, I'm not very good at that. So pre-season we'll work on that quite a lot. But then when we're actually in the season and there's tournaments going on, if we spend all our time doing that, even though I might be able to do it in a game a little bit better, all of the things that I'm already good at, I'm not keeping really sharp, and I'm not focusing on the things that actually win me games. So when we get into the season, we'll then focus more on maintaining the good qualities that each player has, and they're the ones that enable them to perform and to win tournaments. And then it'll just kind of be a little bit more on the back burner, the skills that they're really focusing on. So there's a big change around. There'll often be a bit more fitness pre-season as well, as when we're in the season, because we have tournaments. Tournaments end up being quite good for your fitness because of the sheer number of games that you end up playing.
So you said within the season you're working to keep sharpen up your all of the areas, so that you're not just working on just one. How with the court times and all, how do you do that?
So it'll depend a lot on which tournament or which fixture is coming up. So even though it's a sport which is indoor and everything's meant to always be the same, so it's not going to be affected by outside things, some halls might be quite warm because it might be in a leisure centre where there's a swimming pool, for example, and that makes the hall faster. So the shuttles go really fast. So when you're playing, if you're attacking in a hall like that, you win a lot more points than you do defending. Whereas if you're playing in a really, really big open arena, then the shuttle flies a lot slower and you win a lot more points from defending. So we'll often focus on a different skill depending on where the tournament is going to be complete. So it's like if a tournament suits a certain style of play, we'll work on that style of play in training and in our matches in the run up to that tournament to make sure that we're performing in the best way possible to do well there.
Right. Perfect. Where do you train? Like you said, there's different
So,
environments which affects the games.
so right now we train at the English Institute of Sport, and they have a purpose-built badminton hall upstairs, which is predominantly used by the GB Para Badminton team. So in the evenings, because they use it throughout the day as their full-time training, and then in the evening, then we get use of it for several hours. So we train there, and then on a Sunday, so most of the training is upstairs in that purpose-built hall, but then on a Sunday afternoon, because it's not only the first team that train there, it's a mix of the first, second, and third team. Then we train downstairs in the netball hall. So that's a little bit of a bigger and slower hall, and it's got wooden floors rather than like the purpose-built kind of rubbery kind of floor. So it's a little bit different, but there are tournaments that you go to that will be like that. And the British University Championships get played in that hall as well. So it's useful as like a practice arena.
Perfect. So like before training, how does your coach brief you of like, well, okay, this is what we're doing this session?
So often at the start of the session, whilst we're doing a little bit of a warm-up, he might wander around and chat to players and kind of see what they have coming up over maybe the next few weeks, so he can get a grasp of what he needs to prepare for the future sessions. So if he's done that, then it'll mean in that session he'll kind of already have an idea before the session starts of what's a good idea to do. But then obviously, because people are feeling a different way each day, like you might have had a long day at work, you might have had a long day at uni, something like that, you might not be feeling well. So he'll go in with a bit of a plan at first, but depending on how the players are responding to it, and then he'll talk to the players, and we'll have a chance to like chat between like different practices that we do, where then we can adapt it more to suit the needs during the session.
Perfect. So is it different when you go into the fixtures and tournaments with like who you're playing?
Yeah, so it's given there's not a huge player base in the country, then it ends up being, if you go to a tournament that's up north, let's say somewhere like Newcastle, a lot of the southern players, such as someone who's near London, they don't want to have to drive that far, so they won't play those tournaments. So it's only the people around kind of the Midlands area or like the bottom of the north, like around Sheffield, who actually travel up to places like Newcastle. So if you go up north, you have a very different set of players as you do if you play in the Midlands or if you play down south. So down south and the Midlands kind of attract all of the players and all of the really strong players. But then up north, you only get the strong players from up north or the Midlands. You don't get anyone from down south. But given that there are more players down south than there are up north, the down south tournaments are a little bit more, that people care about them a bit more, like they mean more. So the people from up north are happy to travel all the way down there, even though it doesn't work in the reverse. So often you have a good chance near the start of the season to go up north to a tournament, get a win under your belt, and kind of boost your confidence for the season for the other tournaments.
How does your coach give you feedback with technically?
So often, quite a lot, you'll be able to tell kind of within yourself if a certain thing isn't going right technically. So if I miss it in a shot, then it'll be going somewhere where I don't want it to go, or it'll be going in the net, or it'll be making a lot of mistakes, or it'll just be doing something a bit different every time. So when you kind of see that going on, because there's maybe 15, 20 of us in the hall and there's only the one coach, then when that's going on, then you'll be like, oh, do you mind like just watching? And he'll watch for a little bit and he'll tell you, what are you doing with your technique, why it's doing what it's doing, and he'll show you an example of how to do it properly, and how it should feel if you're connecting with the shuttle in the right way. So he'll describe it to you both like visually, kinesthetically, kind of as many different ways as possible, so that whoever it is can kind of have a way of interpreting how it's meant to feel or meant to look when they play the shot.
as you talk about like swings and not going to where you want to go, does your coach record? So he turns it back to you. So this is what you're doing.
So sometimes we will set up a camera for maybe like a whole game, and you can kind of watch in the game where you end up looking a little unorthodox, because often there's a big link between looking unorthodox and then making a lot of mistakes. Like the correct techniques are kind of there for a reason. They're there because they work most effectively, not just because they look pretty. So if you can tell in a certain area you look a little bit uncomfortable, then you know, okay, I didn't realize that I looked like that when I'm doing that. And at the same time, the nicer it looks and the more repeatable like a body position is, the more you can disguise what shot you're going to play, because you can make them all look quite similar. And then that in itself is quite a big weapon against other players, because it can be a deceptive thing where they think you're going to play a certain shot, but you can play something else because you can play a multitude of shots from that one body position. Whereas if you're more unorthodox, then you get, if you're in one place, you might only have one shot you can play. So the stronger players can often play many different shots from one position.
Do you sorry, with do you know your strengths and weaknesses, technical ability?
Yeah, so my biggest strength I'd say would be I have quite good racket control near the net at the front. So it's when you're doing quite like a small movement. So you might be there and all you've got to do is just a tiny movement with your hand or just brush across the shuttle slightly. And it's those little things that I'm quite good at. And it's more when I'm at the back of the court and it's like a full body rotation and I'm swinging through. That's more when I struggle for the finesse, for things such as turning my hand through the shuttle and slicing it across, or turning it that way and slicing it that way. So it's like the little sharp movements at the front, which are big strengths of mine.
Perfect. Do you go through this with your coach with like like a profile wheel like you're doing performance analysis, but like do you talk to your technical coach of like what's your strengths and what's your weaknesses, and he says what's your strengths and what's your weaknesses? Are they the same or are they completely different?
Yeah, so we'll talk about it in a way where he'll ask me what I think, and then after I've said what I think, he'll say what he's observed or what he's noticed. So then it's a way for me to not only see how I perceive it, but how it looks from the outside and how well they match up. And then I start getting a better awareness of whether I am perceiving the right thing. And over the years, it's kind of built up so that now I can be a lot more self-aware. And then it means even if he's not there, I can think, okay, what would he be thinking if I was playing it like this? And like the relationship we've built up to do with reflecting on that technical aspect of it has allowed me now to kind of use what he's taught me.
You say self-aware. Does that help you in tournaments then? Because you said there's like quite a few, players at a time, and he can only give you a certain little amount of time or something like that, or just live watch and then tell you. So that self-awareness building up, do you get an idea of what's going on in the tournaments?
Yeah, so it ends up being one of my biggest weapons in a tournament, where if I'm playing against another player, even if technically and physically we're quite well matched, or even if he's a little better than I am, on the tactical aspect of it, because of my awareness of what's going wrong and what's going right, and being able to look at him playing and go, that looks a bit wrong, or that looks right. If I can look at him and go, he looks awkward in that area, I can then keep playing him to that area where he like looks awkward. And it kind of lets me know through my own self-awareness that I can be aware of what they're doing wrong. And then that lets me quite easily pick apart other people's weaknesses in a tournament earlier than they maybe pick apart my weakness. And it allows me to basically beat people who the game looked like it would be close against.
That's perfect, mate. That's all I've got so far. Cheers for doing this interview, and
No worries.
wish you well. Good luck with the rest of the season.
Happy to help.